episode of Made in America is brought to you by America's Inventor Lady and Home Talk USA. Home Talk is a proud member of the King's Broadcasting Network, which has been bringing you the best in home-based innovation since 1998.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us for this episode of Made in America.
This segment is brought to you by the law offices of R.P. Baraska. RPB law offices have been bringing corporate-level legal expertise to the independent inventor community for more than 20 years. For all your inventing legal needs, trust rpblawoffices.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Chairman's Countdown with Zach Mottel. I'm your host, Zach Mottel, joined as always by John Toomey, president of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. And we're coming to you across the Home Talk USA radio network, and we're streaming nationwide at hometalkusa.com. Thanks for joining us here today. You know, we're honored. We've got a really great guest for you today, someone who has become one of the strongest voices in Congress on reshoring America's drug manufacturing and confronting our dangerous over-reliance on China and India for our generic medications that most Americans take every day. Senator Rick Scott is here from the fine state of Florida. And John Toomey, great to have you back. Let's dive right in. Senator, last week we had on Representative Buddy Carter, and it was great to talk with him. He emphasized how dependent the U.S. has become on China and India for pharmaceuticals. And your committee has done some investigations, and you've really gotten in pretty deep just to see how, quite frankly, how deep, dangerous, and dependent this is. You know, what has the Senate Aging Committee uncovered about these safety issues in the manufacturing facilities abroad that are making our generic medications?
Well, first off, John, Zach, nice to see you again. We've had 3 hearings so far, and we've put out a report. And it's pretty simple. Americans should be unbelievably alarmed about taking a generic drug. 80+% of generic drugs are made in India and China, and most of our antibiotics are made there also. Almost all of the ingredients come out of China. Now, first off, just think about what China is doing with regard to rare earth. So they could just shut it off, like they've done with rare earth, anytime they want. So let's just say that's all they do. They say, nope, we're not going to give you any more drugs. Okay, we only have weeks of drugs sitting in this country, generic drugs from China and India. So we'd have to really ramp up, which would be very, very, very difficult. So I think that number one puts us at a big disadvantage. Number two is you would think that what you're putting in your body has been somebody in the federal government has actually tested it, right? Aren't we led to believe that we got this great FDA that goes out?
That's FDA-approved, Senator.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that that they are out there busting their butt to make sure these are safe? Not true. Now, if a drug was manufactured in the United States, the FDA does unannounced inspections. So you've got to be on your toes each and every day if you're a manufacturer of drugs in the United States. But if you're in China or India, guess what? They give you notice. They're not unannounced, they're pre-announced. So you have time to clean up your problems, repaint the building, all right? Get rid of all the bad stuff, fabricate your information, doing all those things. So that sounds like the FDA is probably not doing their job, which they are not, okay? So that's number two. Then number three, so we already know that it might not be safe for you. There was a study out of the University of Indiana that you have more than a 50% increased chance of hospitalization or death if you take a generic drug from China and India. So you put all these things together, what are we doing? Right? We're supposed to be relying on a federal government that's going to keep us safe. You think about the food you put in your body, right? You should be doing the exact same things now about generic drugs. You should, before you take a generic drug, you should question whether you should take it or not. And if you can take a drug manufactured in this country, that's what you should be doing. So we've got to get this fixed. The best thing is we got to get drugs made back in America.
Well, Senator, thank you for highlighting that issue and for the attention that your committee is putting on this, because you're exactly right. We do need to get the manufacturing back in America. And besides, the safety issues and these concerns that you highlighted, I mean, it seems incredibly unfair that a domestic manufacturer has to deal with, and again, it's good. We want them to have to deal with the regulatory burden. We want the unannounced FDA inspections, but these foreign companies that are accessing our marketplace and quite frankly have captured the majority of it don't have those same hurdles. That seems incredibly unfair to me, and again, unsafe. And we certainly want, at the Coalition for Prosperous America, we represent domestic producers. We want these good jobs. Americans certainly aren't paying less for health care, right? And we're paying to subsidize manufacturing. We're paying for drugs made in India and China. Why don't we have those good jobs here, right? I want to see Americans employed by the American healthcare system. But Senator, can you tell us a little more? I mean, what are the consequences? Are there health consequences when these drugs come from the unreliable foreign sources? I mean, people are at risk. Is that true or not?
Absolutely. But, look, it even gets worse than what I said when I started off. Do you realize that I think it's 1 out of every 4? Now, think about this. With unannounced inspections, okay, maybe years apart for drug companies in India or China, still, I think 1 out of every 4 of those companies are subject to an FDA violation. Now, that should alarm you, but it gets worse. If the FDA determines that their generic drug made in India and China, if there's a shortage, they waive the quality problem.
Wait a second. Really?
Yep. They waive the quality problem. They know there's drugs that are produced by companies in an unsafe environment, but because there's a shortage, they waive that problem. So the FDA has completely fallen flat on their job here. So you should, there's so many reasons to buy American products because it creates jobs for your neighbor, right? We want jobs in this country. But think about it. You should really think about what you put in your body. So how do you solve this? You do it like everything else. You want to know where things are made. We should know the country of origin of everything we put in our body. So if you're going to take a generic drug, if you tell people where it's manufactured and where the ingredients come from, guess what they're going to do? They're going to buy American because they know in America it's safer. Now, then they say, oh, it might cost a little bit more. Now, think about it. You know how drugs are made primarily by robots. Do you think robots cost less in India and China than they do in the United States? No, they don't cost less. They don't cost more here than they do there. So we had, in one of our hearings, we had an individual come, he testified the fact that you can bring this manufacturing back, right? You can bring the manufacturing back here. It doesn't have to cost more money. And then we had some companies that manufacture in the United States talk about the difficulty of getting contracts with our own federal government. So if you're a member of our military, you got the exact same problem. Your military is giving you drugs made in India and China that might be unsafe to you, right? The VA, they're giving our veterans, right, drugs that might not be safe for them. So just think about the buying power of the VA and our military, what they could give to American manufacturers. And are they doing it? No. And all those things have to change.
This is terrible, Senator. Yeah, I'm aware our military is the biggest buyer of drugs, and I'm aware they did some testing with a little lab called Valsher, and they found some surprising things, some actually quite dastardly things. The drugs weren't behaving as they were supposed to. But yet, like you said, nothing is being done about this. We're still trying to, shop around for a quarter of a penny of a pill. Like you said, also, we've proven with our economic team that it's not going to raise prices, but it is going to raise security, and it's going to bring some good jobs back. And people who support those robots and the machines and the tooling used to make drugs. Companies like mine and other supply chain companies want to be back in that game. But what we're doing is just absolutely terrible. And besides what you just described, also, you mentioned when there's a shortage that we accept poor quality, which I did not know that. My mind is just blown. I think most of the people listening to this radio show would be disgusted to know that. Probably each and every one of them takes at least one pill a day. These are not the name brand drugs we see on the commercial. They're not fancy. This is your allergy pill, your stomach medicine, your blood pressure pill. Not fancy. If you're listening to this and this bothers you, get on the phone, call your representative, call your senator, and let them know you want the American drug supply chain brought home and that you're not tolerating this anymore. Because like Senator Scott says, it's terrible. But besides the quality issues, Is this driving shortages? We've heard of, things running out of stock during the pandemic, right? Certain countries stopped shipping drugs or masks when there was a time of crisis. What about even now? Are there still shortages and supply chain disruptions? Have you heard about that, Senator?
Absolutely. And the reason is, the reason why there's shortages is because we're not relying on homegrown products. Let's, what our government should be doing is making sure, right, that there's competition, making sure that we are self-sufficient. Like I always tell everybody, I love my mom. My mom has passed away, but she was a wonderful person. Guess what? I never wanted to be dependent on her. I actually didn't want to be told what to do. Right? We should think the same way. All right. I think all of us probably think that way. We should think the same way about our country. Let's don't be dependent on some foreign adversary, especially China, who has clearly decided to be our enemy.
That's right. Or what about India? I mean, maybe people consider India more friendly than China, but if it's about our national security, if it's about us being independent, like you said, independent from our parents, we've got to be independent in America. We've got to have those drugs. It doesn't matter if they're coming from Canada or China or India. We need to have it here so that we are secure and strong as a nation. Plus, we get the good jobs. I mean, John Toomey, you've seen some of this throughout our membership base at CPA. We've got about a minute left here. Can you quickly give us some color on that?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, look, there are manufacturers making generic drugs here in this country. But the senator rightly pointed out, they are under siege by product coming from India, from China, largely subsidized by foreign governments. They're dumping this product here. The product's sub-quality, subpar at best. And it really hurts the current production that we have, the little that's still here. And also those who are looking to make investment in this country, right? There's a lot of interest and eagerness right now to get involved in pharmaceutical production. And I think a lot of folks are waiting on what comes from the Commerce Department here with their pending 232 investment.
Well, that's great stuff, John. Let's get that done. Let's give them certainty. Speaking of paying our bills, we're going to pay the bills for a minute. We've got to go to a commercial for a moment. When we come back, we're going to be back with Senator Rick Scott from Florida. And don't change that dial. Stay right here with us on the Home Talk USA Radio Network.
This segment is brought to you by SearchQuest Patent Search. SearchQuest provides for a comprehensive patent search that searches the entire world and not just the U.S. Patent Office. Make sure that before you spend those big bucks having a patent written, you've done your due diligence by getting a comprehensive patent search. Use SearchQuestPatents.com for all your patent search needs. They scour the world for you.
This is the Chairman's Countdown with your host, Zach Model, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. Count down with us as we explore trade, tariffs, and industrial strategy with the leaders driving America's prosperity and security.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Countdown, where we discuss reshoring and rebuilding the American middle class through industrialization. I'm your host, Zach Model, and we're all about making things here in the United States, and so is Senator Rick Scott from the fine state of Florida. Senator, you've been a vocal proponent about the structural failure in our generic drug ecosystem. And right before the break, we were talking a little bit about that and some of the quality systems. I mean, I think people are just, their minds would be blown if they knew the truth. I think most people don't know this. Hospitals and these GPOs, the purchasing organizations, government purchasing organizations, they're really incentivized right now to buy the cheapest drug, not necessarily the safest drug or the highest quality drug. Senator, what do you think? Why isn't drug quality a factor in the purchasing decisions today?
I think we took it for granted. I think hospitals, consumers, everybody, took it for granted that the FDA was doing their job and that a generic drug made in India and China was as safe as one made in America. And what we found out is first off, that's not true. Number one, we do want jobs made in this country. We should be supporting American manufacturing so we get our neighbors' jobs, our kids' jobs, so we get more American jobs, and they're good paying jobs. But on top of that, what we found is the quality's not there. We should never be dependent on a foreign country, especially one that's decided to be our adversary like China. We should never be dependent on somebody that we know has a poor quality product that we're going to put into our body. So what we should expect is everybody in sort of the food chain, from your doctor, your hospital, your pharmacist, your group purchasing organization, your insurance company, anybody that could be involved in the PBM, everybody that's involved in buying drugs They should be part of their decision should be, where can I get the best quality product? And if I can get it made in this country, let's get it made in this country because it'll create more American jobs. And so I think as people understand this and get more information about this, they're going to demand the hospitals, the doctors, the pharmacies, everybody to do a better job.
I think so too, Senator, because, as a consumer, right, every day we go out and we buy things, and sure, we're looking for a good deal and the right price. But if it doesn't work at all, you buy a lawnmower and you pull, it doesn't start. It doesn't matter how cheap it was. And that's literally what's happening with these drugs. People take them, they don't dissolve like they're supposed to, either too quickly, too slowly. They don't have the right effect, and people are dying from it. I think the general public doesn't appreciate that. They say, oh, grandma went to the hospital, she's been taking the medicine, and her blood pressure, they couldn't get under control, and she died. A lot of times when you talk to doctors who know about this problem, who are honest, they say, you know what, I'm concerned about the quality of the medication, that it didn't do what it was supposed to, and that's why she died. So, thank you for your emphasis on this. But, how have we gotten into this race for the cheapest product? It certainly penalizes American manufacturers, doesn't it, right? People who make it here, the race to the bottom, they've been cut out, and the American producer. Improving transparency, quality, safety, is that going to be something that will help the domestics as well as our patients?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think Americans want to buy American products. I mean, it's just like, but what frustrates me is if you go on a website, if you go on Amazon and you want to say, I only will buy American, it's almost impossible to get the information.
You can't tell.
Well, you get the box. No. I've had a bill to fix that, but it hasn't been, Amazon has been lobbying against it. But then you wait until you get the box that's made in China, and then you get to send it back, which is what I do. Because, one, I know it's poor quality, and I know it's not helping an American worker. I want to help American workers. If you think about, here's what American workers are dealing with right now. One, it's hard to get a good paying job, right? Wages are not stayed up with inflation. If you look at what government has done by not worrying about American workers, the cost of everything has gone up except for American wages. So the cost for food, the cost for housing, the cost for insurance, the cost of all these things. Why is that? Because the government has not cared about hardworking American workers and their ability to put food on the table, buy a house, buy a car, pay for their insurance. And what we've got to do by building by helping our neighbors, by buying American products, one, we're going to get a better product, we're going to get better service, all right, and we're going to get a better neighborhood.
That's right, sir. We have the rule of law, too, behind us. These products you mentioned, the ones you get on Amazon. Boy, I know it's not, we're talking about generic drugs here, but I've bought some electronics. They come in here. They're not UL certified. You plug it in and it breaks or fries out or starts a fire, right? So people definitely do want a safe product. They'd love to buy from their neighbor. And this is the work we do at the Coalition for a Prosperous America. This is what our cutting edge economic research shows, that when we do make things as a nation, we become prosperous and secure. The fastest way to raise the wages for the vast majority of Americans, those are the people making $150,000 a year or less, is by having more manufacturing. When we increase this country's percent of manufacturing, we will see broad-based wage growth and prosperity again, moving, like you said, faster than inflation, wage growth above inflation. Every nation that does it gets ahead. Germany did it. Japan did it. South Korea did it. China's doing it. Taiwan's doing it. And not to blame them, but shame on America. Like you said, shame on our bad government policies that have offshored industry after industry. And when it comes to, again, the generic drugs that we're talking about, it's not just saving money, it's saving lives. People are dying because of this. John, I know we've done a little bit of work across in the House and the Senate on this. Are there some bills going on in the House? I want to hear from the Senator about what he's got going on his side. What's happening in the House that might tie together on this?
Well, there are, right? There's the Pills Act, which we've seen supported by Claudia Tenney on Ways and Means. It's a bill that basically provides tax credits to support throughout the supply chain. We talked about the Made in America Act with Buddy Carter last week, which would look to bolster government procurement of product being made here. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems we see, and the Senator touched on it. He's been touching on it in his hearings, is that you have companies actually making product here, and the federal government goes out and they purchase from, product made in India or China. It just has to stop. So we have to do everything we can to ensure that we're buying American when it's available, and that we're supporting them through, robust tax credits. I mean, there's a tax credit for just about every other thing in the book. There should be some support here to, ensure that our most basic and essential medicine is made here in the U.S. I mean, when we talk to pediatricians. I mean, this affects everyone, right? But especially the vulnerable, the young, the elderly. I mean, it's insane to think that in this country, we don't have sufficient supply of antibiotics, right? And that's a terrible situation for any family to deal with when they're, having to deal with their young ones. So I know that's been a top concern for the senator, but certainly government procurement, anything we can do on tax credits would be a great start.
Senator, what do you see from your perch in the Senate? He talked about 2 of the House bills. In our perspective, what do you see coming down the pipeline?
Well, I'm very optimistic. Number one, the more we explain this to the American public, they're going to demand change with or without government. So that's going to happen. They're going to start demanding that their hospitals, their doctors, their pharmacists tell them where things are manufactured. That's that one. Number two, we're going to get legislation passed. It's going to basically be country of origin. They're going to start telling us. And when you get a pill, they're going to say, oh, that was made in Dallas, Texas, or that was made in Shanghai. They're going to start telling us, and we're going to pick, we're going to pick American products because we know they're a higher quality. And on top of being higher quality, the side benefit, it helps our American families get a good paying job so they can raise families, which is what we want in our neighborhoods.
Senator, thank you so much for your leadership on restoring America's drug manufacturing base, protecting seniors, and exposing these vulnerabilities in our supply chain. I wish everyone was talking about it. All of your colleagues, please, and to our listeners, please call in. We're going to talk a little bit more. We've got one more break coming up. We're going to dig into the economic side of this. But again, thank you for joining us today. Senator Rick Scott from Florida, what a great guy and a leader on this issue. We're going to go to commercial. Join us back on the Home Talk USA Radio Network in a few moments.
Bye, Zach. Bye, John.
Thanks again.
If you're an inventor or you know an inventor out there who would just like to be able to have a conversation with other inventors, join the Inventors Roundtable. It's free. The meetings are virtual, so you can be anywhere in America and talk to another inventor. And for a lot of folks out there, understanding the process, being able to ask questions, getting good service provider information is critical to the inventing process. So, got questions? Want to join? It's free. inventorsroundtable.org.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Countdown. I'm your host, Zach Model, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. We're coming here to you live on the Home Talk USA Radio Network. And before the break, we had Senator Rick Scott joining us and John Toomey from the Coalition for a Prosperous America. We were talking about some of the problems with America's medical supply chain and the fact that we've literally offshored 90%, if not more, of our generic drug manufacturing. We talked about the health problems of drugs that don't work right, how this really isn't saving the average person any money at all, and it's really costing America a lot of good jobs and what is a high-tech industry, generic drug manufacturing. So now I want to get a little bit into the economics behind all of that, and we've got CPA's economist Andrew Reichenberg here. Andrew, great to have you here today. You recently testified before the Senate Aging Committee, where Senator Rick Scott is actually the chairman, and you laid out kind of some of the economic risks of offshoring the pharmaceutical supply chains. Your CPA report put real numbers behind what Senator Scott and what we heard Rep. Buddy Carter last week on the show, they were warning us about. Some of what you talked about was how the API production, China has gotten complete control of that. And, can you tell us a little bit more about what APIs are and how China and these other countries have really taken complete control of that supply chain?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are extremely reliant on countries like China at this point, and there's multiple risks that are involved in this. One of the main risks is that China is a potential geopolitical adversary, or if they're not already. But also, if any event comes across like COVID or any supply chain disruptions, even to a single plant, our system is immediately vulnerable. And this is because we are so reliant on China at this point. 80 to 90% of the world's key antibiotic ingredients come from China, and they're the sole producer, the only producer for 20% of the APIs in America's essential medicines. And then even with final drug production that we're a lot more reliant on India for, India itself is also reliant on China for about 80% of its APIs. So no matter how you look at this, at all levels, we are deeply reliant on China at this point, and it's creating huge vulnerabilities in the system. And it's led to the main problem behind whether you name it the shortages, the safety issues, the supply chain security, all of these problems are directly linked to our import dependence and our lack of domestic production.
Wow. Wow. I can't believe that. Things that are really we'd consider essential, right? Antibiotics, painkillers, basic medicines here. 80 to 90% coming from overseas. There's maybe one source left in America or no sources. I think most people aren't aware of this, and it's got to change. We've seen things about, some pricing distortions and some foreign pricing distortions, how they kind of wipe out U.S. manufacturers. Can you speak a little bit to that? What have you seen in the evidence there?
Yes, this is the direct reason behind why we've had such a diminishing amount of domestic production. And just to put some numbers on that, in 2002, we had an 84% domestic market share for drugs in the United States. So 84% of the drugs that people were consuming were made here at home. But as of 2024, this is only 37%. This is a really complete collapse. And the main reason behind this, as you were hinting at, is the pricing issue. Drugs that are coming in from places like India or China are heavily subsidized, and they cut corners. They don't have as good of labor standards. They don't have as good of safety standards. And between these subsidies and these corner cutting on essential safety issues, as Senator Scott recently pointed out, 54% higher risk for severe adverse events from drugs from India. And this is what's making these medicines coming overseas a lot cheaper. And it's undermining our own producers, forcing them out of business and collapsing our domestic supply. But they're being treated the same, these low quality imported drugs and our domestic production, but they really shouldn't be. And so it's both a supply chain issue and a safety issue at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah, like the senator said, we're not differentiating on quality. Nobody seems to care about the quality at all. They care about the price when they buy it. I mean, the consumer who takes the drug would like to care about quality, but as we also heard, you can't figure out where it's coming from. And generally, the consumer in this case doesn't have a lot of choice of where they get, not only where it came from or what pill they take. It's kind of what the hospital gives them or the pharmacy gives them. We really don't get a lot of choice. It's unfortunate where we could do our own quality control or check on it and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, I think people don't realize. And then again, we get back to what the senator said. People think, oh, it's FDA approved. It's somebody's checking this. This is regulated, right? It's not. It's not. It is literally not regulated. Once it's approved, there's very little checking. And when they do check, it's call ahead and let them know to get ready and clean it all up. And then we'll look at it. So there's a lot of risk here in the supply chain. And, at the Coalition for Prosperous America, we represent, a lot of domestic producers, and we've heard from their side on this and certainly tried to dig into the issues. John Toomey's here with me. And, John, what have you kind of seen as you talk to our members? And they've heard obviously Andrew's work and some of the testimony we've given to policymakers like Senator Scott and Carter. What are we doing to push some legislative reforms with this work? What's happening out there? Looks like we lost John Toomey. So, okay, Andrew, it's just you and me here today. Sorry about that, folks. We got a bad connection. Well, Andrew, maybe you know about some of the legislative things we heard from Senator Scott and Carter. Do you have anything else that you want to add about that?
Yeah, I think this comes back to a few of the main issues that are at the heart of this pharmaceutical industry. And one of the main ones is a lack of domestic supply. And so in order to solve this, you need two main things. You need to stabilize the market for the current domestic producers, and you also need to really kickstart domestic production and incentivize investment and production here at home. And the two main ways to do this are, number one, Section 232 tariffs that protect the market and equalize this heavily subsidized imports that are coming in and displacing U.S. producers. And so that gives market room for U.S. producers to grow. And then the second thing you need to do is jumpstart the increase in domestic production here at home through investment and production tax incentives, such as the PILLS Act that is currently proposed in the House that John talked about earlier. And so between these two measures, you're able to get this market room for U.S. producers and actually expand upon it and utilize it.
And I think these kind of things are what, when we talk about producers wanting to get some certainty, right? There's a lot of money waiting on the sidelines to invest here in America, create jobs and start this up. This is the kind of certainty they're looking for, correct? Some certainty on tariffs and policy that would make people comfortable spending. If you're going to spend $1 billion on a plant, you certainly want to know that you're going to get a return on investment. Is this what they're looking for, Andrew?
Exactly. And a lot of these facilities, they can be constructed and production can increase relatively quickly. But even that is a 12 to 24-month timeline to get a lot of these facilities up and running. So in order for these investments to really play out, you need this long-term guidance. You need long-term established policies, whether they're production incentives, whether they're tariffs. And this gives that nice forward guidance so that companies can be confident, invest that America does care about drug quality. They do care about having a manufacturing base here at home, and they can make the decisions to make that a reality.
Yeah, well, I certainly want to see that come back for the safety reasons we heard about, but also the good jobs and the good supply chain. Because, when they build a factory, they need a lot of inputs for that factory. And those things certainly do slow down. And that's why manufacturing is one of the highest multiplier, highest job creating industries out there. So, good. I see we got John's connection back up again here. John, we've just been talking with Andrew a little bit about, bringing the production back and what can help with that. One of the things we hear about when we talk about incentives, it sounds like, people, I think in their mind, they worry they're going to be paying more for medicine, right? This is going to drive up the cost of healthcare for people. And I know that's important right now, but is that really the case? If we bring our medicine home, is it going to raise prices?
No, absolutely not. I mean, and that's the beauty of the report that Andrew put out, right? Showing just how much of a markup there is in the generic drug supply chain, right? I mean, these costs will be absorbed from both the middlemen, the PBMs, the GPOs, the hospitals, the folks all throughout the supply chain leading up to the patient. And, in some cases, I think, we had a real world example where one of our members was manufacturing a product and I think it came out to about $1.30, right? By the time it hit the patient, it was about $8. where where did the additional cost come from? Well, it came from the
More than 4x, right?
right, more than 4x. And so there's plenty of room to absorb whatever marginal increase in price there will be. But can you really put a price on safe, effective medicine? Right? Like there's an old saying, cheap is expensive. I think that's
Yep.
where we've hit. We've hit rock bottom. And it's so great to hear the senator and his commitment to these issues. I mean, there's been no bigger leader than him on this topic in the Senate. A lot of credit will be due to him and his leadership and his in multiple hearings and coverage that he's been having on this topic in a
We've been
bipartisan.
talking about it for a long time. It's great to see him making the move on this. Do you think we'll finally get something passed? We don't have a lot of time left here, John.
I think we will. I think we'll see something. I think there's a bipartisan interest. I think a lot will determine how much commerce handles on their own, and hopefully with Scott, we can see some good finality to the issue.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John, and thank you, Andrew. Don't go anywhere. I'm Zach Model. You're listening to the Chairman's Countdown, brought to you with the Coalition for a Prosperous America on Home Talk USA Radio. We'll return in a few minutes with some more predictions for 2026 from John and Andrew. We'll talk more about the economic case behind reshoring our drugs. Don't touch your dial. Stay right with us on the Home Talk USA Radio Network.
Hi, this is a tranny pull-up for little boys, and it's a great product to use. It makes it easy for the parent and the child when learning how to potty train. The coolest part about the product is that you don't have to take the child's pants all the way down every time that they need to use the restroom. You can just open this part here, and the child can tinkle through here, and it makes it easy for the parent and the child. It's a great product, and I cannot wait until it hits the market.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Countdown. I'm your host, Zach Model, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. You can see more about our work at prosperousamerica.org. Just before the last break, we were talking to Andrew Reichenberg and John Toomey, both from the Coalition for a Prosperous America. And before that, we had Senator Rick Scott from the fine state of Florida. And we were talking about some of the concerns regarding the offshoring of our drug manufacturing and active pharmaceutical ingredient supply chain and how that really doesn't get cheaper medicine for anybody and presents a lot of health risks for Americans taking medicine. It also doesn't get us good jobs. But you know what? There are some good news, some bright spots. We heard some legislation from the senator and a week before from Representative Carter about some possible changes coming down from the Washington on this. But even before the actual changes have happened, President Trump has been talking about this issue and talked about the Section 232. There's an investigation going on right now on our drug supply chain, and there's a potential threat of 100% tariffs to be levied on that. And you know what? It hasn't even happened, but what has happened, just the talk, just the threat, just looking at this problem, Pfizer has invested about $70 billion in America to bring drug manufacturing home, and Eli Lilly's in two separate investments has put in $11.5 billion into American manufacturing. So, the tariffs are working. They are bringing the drug supply chain home, and, it's not raising prices. In fact, just today, Lilly cut the drug, their famous weight loss drug, the one that everybody wants to be on, they cut the price of it. So look, we're bringing the manufacturing home, we're lowering prices on healthcare, and we're getting such an improvement in quality and safety. Again, people don't even realize what's out there in their medical cabinets. It's dangerous. So let's bring that all home. And to do that, there's a lot of economic benefits. I mentioned a few of them, but Andrew, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the benefits of reshoring the pharmaceutical and the API manufacturing?
Yes, these investments that you mentioned, these are directly from the policy announcements or the policy guidance that's coming from the U.S. government and specifically the Trump administration. And it really cannot be underestimated how powerful these sort of policy signals are for businesses looking for these to make these long-term investment decisions here at home. But the economic benefits of this go far beyond just these investments and these new manufacturing sites. Those have those jobs themselves, but there's also huge employment multiplier effects that happen after these jobs are created. For example, the Economic Policy Institute has calculated that for every 100 durable manufacturing jobs here in the U.S., there are 744 additional jobs that are created throughout the supply chain. This includes 300 additional jobs at direct suppliers who get business from the manufacturer, and 450 induced jobs. And these are the economic ripple effects, the new employees that are made from spending at restaurants, at stores, services, paying local taxes for schools, police departments, and more. And so this is one of the highest employment ripple effects throughout any economic sector. And so that's why these sort of jobs are so important for entire communities here across the U.S. And then on top of that, this is also going to have great benefits for other players in the U.S. economy and healthcare system, such as hospitals. They're going to benefit by not having to pay 300 to 500% documented markups when there's a shortage. And so really, this is just going to be a win for not just the healthcare sector, not just patients, but the entire economy.
That's fantastic. A 7.4 multiplier, Andrew. We should just be, chasing these things, laser focused on bringing these kind of jobs home because of the economic boom that we get from them and the national security. John, it wasn't always like this, right? We used to have a much richer environment. What are your thoughts on some sectors where the U.S. can win back quickly? Is this one of them, pharmaceuticals, with some quick legislation? What did we see in the past? What could we see in the future?
Yeah, no, it definitely is one of the industries. And I mean, it's an industry that should be targeted, right? If you look in the mid 80s, around 1984, going up into the mid 90s, we had a robust domestic footprint of production here. Everything from API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, to the fill finish of the product. I think it was around 1990, 1995, we had about 218,000 people employed in this industry. That was about 1,500 different U.S. pharmaceutical establishments, and establishments could be everything from API to the fill finish of a product. That was a pretty substantial, robust domestic base, right? We had productive capacity at that point in time. And then as time went on, early 2000s, we really see this progressive push to offshore, this globalization of product. And that's where you start to see the movement of the API production to China, the fill finish being offshored to India. And those governments capitalized big time, right? They threw subsidies at the industries. They made sure they were going to dominate this industry. They saw the great success the U.S. was having, right? There were pockets throughout the country that, if you look at the wealth per capita in those counties where you had production going on, those counties did really well on national average, right? Parts of Chicago, outside Philadelphia, up Route 202 into North Jersey, even out into California. And, now most of that's relatively gone. But, we do have the ability to fill finished product here in this country. We lag in certain critical capabilities like fermentation to make antibiotics. We lag in cytotoxic capabilities to make chemotherapy products. All those things can be built, right? We can build greenfield, facilities to manufacture those products. That's not a problem. API production, that's critical. Okay, so when the senator talked about API, we need to bring back API production, large batch traditional API production. There's a little bit right now in the middle part of the country, but I really think we need to deploy, a kind of all the above approach, retrofit current facilities that are out there, invest in building some new facilities in API. API is critical, right? We need the active pharmaceutical ingredient production here because after that, you can make these basic medicines, whether at a generic, pharmaceutical fill finish site, the person who does the end manufacturing once they take the API, or it can be done by a contract manufacturing operation, a CMO. And there actually are quite a few CMOs in this country where, you would go with your application and make this drug and they would make the drug for you, right? So we have the ability to do these things, but we really lag the API. That's what we need. We need the API production here in this country.
And if we start to focus on the quality and the reliability of these things and we give some incentives, not a lot, we should be able to bring that back fairly quickly, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt.
Well, I'm looking forward to that in 2026. Let's get some of this done, John. I know we're fighting hard for our members of the Coalition for Prosperous America. Listeners, you can check out more of our work at prosperousamerica.org. But I want to say thank you again to Senator Rick Scott, CPA economist Andrew Reichenberg, and John Toomey, CPA president, for joining me on the show. Over the last 2 weeks, we had Congressman Buddy Carter, Senator Scott, and Andrew. We laid out what's going on with the pharmaceutical supply chain. And at CPA, we're out there fighting every day for American producers, American workers, and American prosperity. Thank you. We'll see you next week on Home Talk USA Network.